Hello and welcome back. We are in another little different room in Login today, and I have Morgan with me. So we're taking, there's so many different subjects that I sort of covered so far on the pod, but we are taking a little bit more of a bodybuilding route today, and we are going to discuss posing. And I think actually it covers more, like, obviously yes for the stage, but I think also people who aren't even for the stage still find it really interesting because everyone loves a flex.
I would say so, yeah. There's a lot more work goes into it than people realise.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are always like, oh, I want to know like how to, but I don't. So we're going to delve into that. So obviously Morgan himself is a posing coach, and you create your own routines, you love flow, you have your own clients. So yeah, how did you get so into the posing side of things? So you've been training for a long time anyway.
Yeah, the posing, it didn't so much come by chance, but it wasn't something I expected to get too much into when I started bodybuilding. So I did my first competition back in 2020, and if you look at the video of my routine back then, it was shocking. Like
it's crazy when you look back at it, isn't it?
I had like a one-time posing coach back then. It was just a really experienced bodybuilder who I asked to help, and it didn't do a bad job at all. It got me onto the path that I'm at now. But coming up to my routine and looking back at it, I was like, it's not good. So I wanted to be able to show off my hard work a lot better. So then I invested in a proper posing coach for my next season. Going from there,
you've done 3 seasons now, haven't you? 2.
Technically 3. I wouldn't count my first one because it was just like a kind of first timers take show. Gotcha. It wasn't like a season. So technically 2 proper seasons and 1 trial. So yeah, my second season where I competed at the Arnold Classics and GBO Europe or NFM European Championships, the posing coach I had at the time, he designed my routine. He taught me the basics of proper classic posing. And I found so much love for it, and learning the discipline of being able to show what I've worked for so hard in the best light possible. And I actually ended up winning Best Posing Award on the day of GBO European.
It's so good that they have that award. And I think it's quite nice to like recognise like the athletes' posing abilities as well, especially as separate, because whether or not it's to do with like the lineup and the results that come in that in your class, it's still quite nice to have an extra award and show that as well, because some people's posing's impeccable, but obviously their physique,
for sure,
can change depending on who else is on the stage. And obviously, so your speciality is classic posing, classic bodybuilding. Now, there are loads of different categories, male and female. And so this can vary. Obviously, I only know, speaking from the figure poses, and which cross over a little bit with bodybuilding poses. But obviously, you've got men's physique, you've got open bodybuilding, you've got all of them. And then obviously females, bikini, figure, train bikini, wellness, the list is endless. Female bodybuilding, it is confusing. And I think as well, when people are like, oh, you're a bodybuilder, and I think it's very confusing to grasp the classes.
Yeah, I think
to start with,
people hear that, oh, you're a bodybuilder, they just think massive muscles, flexing down.
Yeah.
They don't realise that there's different physiques with different genetics and different styles of bodybuilding, but it branches out massively.
Yeah, and the poses vary so much. Obviously, there are always crossovers, but and I think it's not until you go and see a show that you're then like, this makes sense. And it all kind of puts it into perspective. Now, I always think, posing is the icing on the cake, without a doubt. And it can change like where you place as well, and can make a huge difference. It's, what would you say sort of to add to that?
So it's something that I came up with recently, because a client of mine asked me to explain the importance of posing on stage. So I came up with a little John Berry analogy. Obviously, you've had John on the pod before.
Yes.
He has his analogies and he's very good at them. John is also my coach as well. So when it comes to posing, I compare it to a dinner party.
Okay, so, I'm intrigued where this is going.
So bear with me on this. It won't take too long. So you've got a house. Your house is your physique. I'll do the comparisons where we're at. So your house is your physique. You've just had a brand new renovation on this house, and we put a lot of work into it. It looks amazing. It's ready to show off. The renovation is your prep. So you decide, okay, I've got this new renovation. I'm going to have a dinner party. The dinner party being your competition or show day. You decide, I'm going to invite 6 or 7 people around to this dinner party for them to come see the new renovation. The judges are the people. So when you have a dinner party at your house, apart from the food, obviously, what is the one thing you're going to make sure that your house is before people come over?
Absolutely spotless.
Clean and tidy, right? So cleaning and tidying is your posing. So in this scenario. So every time you clean and tidy your house, you're going to do it repetitively anyway, because obviously your house collects dust and things like that. But each time you do it, you might notice a corner that collects a bit more dust, or you might notice a wall in the kitchen where the frying pan's splashing oil on, but you didn't notice it in that place before.
Yeah.
So every time you go back to cleaning and tidying your house, you're going to go back to those places and make sure it's absolutely spotless. So that comes with practice, and you get better at it every time. So also, when these people come over, let's say a part of your house is your garden. You know that you are really into your gardening and you're very good at it. You love how good you are with your grass and everything else. So you want these people to see that. You want them to admire it, and you know that it's the strongest point of your house for people to give good feedback.
Yeah.
So your strongest pose, essentially. So
and also, like, there are stronger parts of your physique.
There are,
and you might as well make the most of it.
So, yeah, exactly that. So your house being your physique, your garden, say, is your quads or something like that. So it's the strongest part of your body. So you want to, when they come over, you might take them outside for a drink in the garden before the party starts, or you might situate the dining table within view of the garden. So they can always see that strong part of the house. Also, within this renovation, there's one of the rooms that has a big crack in it, crack in the wall. So when you know it's not up to standards, you know it's not good enough to be presentable. So what you normally do in those situations, if you can't change it by the time of the dinner party, you will put a poster or put a plant in front of it so it hides it. That little crack you can't change it, and that can come down to, if we're doing it in relation to bodybuilding, that could be weak genetics, that could be your waist wasn't tight enough, or it could be you haven't come into condition on time. So,
and there are so many variables which come into the day of the show, especially peak week. Like, there are so many things, one, that can go wrong, but equally that can change at the split of like in the blink of an eye, shall I say, because you just don't know. And, you know, a lot of people play around with so much, and it's like trying to keep things as simple as possible so that your body's just like happy more than anything else.
It is, yeah. And it comes down to timing and everything. You've got to get everything as best as you can do on the day. So in relation to that is by putting a plant or a poster in front of that crack, you've then people have gone into that room, and you've then manipulated their minds to create an illusion that that room is something that it's not. And we do the same thing in posing, where if our waist isn't tight enough by the time it comes to show day, because ideally we want a small waist, what we do is we add in what's called a hip dip to basically cuts out half of the waist, and it makes our waist look really small, but the rest of us really big. So again, you're creating illusion, and you're making something look like it's not. Sorry, making something look like you see.
Yeah, I got you. But I think as well to sort of come into that is you like, if we were to stand relaxed, it would, even on like, if we were like in like stage condition, we would look entirely different. And there's so many people are like, oh my God, you know, huge. I mean, I'm not huge. Morgan's much bigger than I am, but I'm like, no, trust me, I'm tiny. Like, and the second you're in a relaxed position, it changes it. It's as if people like think you walk around like absolutely hench all the time. We don't do that because that would hurt. And it takes so much time, like the practice that comes into it. Like, there is never like it's never too early to practice posing. I even remember I like attempted some bits for my first shoot with John a year before I even was competing. And like looking back now, it was horrendous. But it's just like, and then obviously, yes, in prep, it comes to a little bit more to the forefront of your mind. Obviously, still keep it in off season, but the mind changes a little bit because things aren't as aesthetic in off season as they are in prep, as expected. So, but there is never like, just start. If you're all sat there thinking about it, just start posing and start practicing, and ask people who, even if it's to start with friends who might have a bit more of an idea of posing or who have competed and you haven't, and maybe you're not interested in competing, but you just want to sort of get a vibe for it. I think that's also important to highlight, because you just practice, and there's not one, you can't over practice.
No, that's
like,
true.
It won't.
When people come to me, I've had people come to me 4 weeks out of their competition and say, "Oh, could you make me a routine, or can you teach me a certain pose?" All right, when's your competition?
Terrifies.
4 weeks. I'm like, no. I mean, I can do my best, but you're not going to be up to standard. And it's, it's going back to the dinner party analogy. You wouldn't have a dinner party at your house without making sure it's clean and presentable.
Yeah.
Why would you go through an entire prep
or prep for it?
And get on stage without making it presentable?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just, people will go to loads of different dinner parties and see loads of different houses and loads of new renovations.
Yeah.
The judges are going to see loads of physiques and loads of really good conditions, but they will notice the ones that are presented the best. And that is why it counts so much.
Yeah. And it's such a poignant part of it. And it can really change, even sat like in the audience. Like, bodybuilding shows are boring for anyone that has seen them. Once you've seen one, you've seen them all near enough. Obviously, depending on who's on stage. But they are long days. Like, if you're in the audience as well, like, you want to be captured by, even though I know that they may not be the judges, but the judges are going to see hundreds of physiques that entire day. So what's going to make you stand out? And I think, and it kind of gets the vibe for the audience as well. And everyone kind of gets a bit pumped up, and have fun with it as well. And I think that it will highlight so much more to the judges. Like, I think I know it's slightly different for bodybuilding, but obviously females were smiling away. I mean, I love that from a stage perspective anyway, from performing, but it's like, you want to have kind of character behind your face as well. Like, and you want your physique to come to life. Like, there's nothing worse than watching someone pose and they're so like po-faced.
Yeah, I remember if I showed you the first photos of my first competition, where I had a basic knowledge of posing, but I was putting more focus on flexing rather than the control of the poses. So I'm standing there pulling a front double bicep going, and it just looks horrendous.
And it's flipping hard. And I think when you practice, you've got to practice be able to hold it. And like you say, control. That is pretty much most of the point to come into the posing, because if you can't control it, the judges are going to notice that. And then for someone who's standing next to you who's completely still, that's going to make so much more of a difference than you sort of standing there shaking. Yes, obviously everyone gets a little bit nervous, we all get a little bit shaky by the end of the rounds and things.
If you're a little bit dehydrated, anything that can factor into shaking, but also controlling poses, because yourself, it's a workout.
Oh my gosh. Apparently, I feel like I'm the only person in my classes that sweated buckets. I had some tough rounds in the first.
They held you there for a long time.
Yeah, the first show we did like 2 rounds, and I was like, oh, we must be finished. And then they were like, and again, and then we did it again, and I was dripping coming out of it. And I remember thinking, oh my god, like my ponytail was getting sweat. They had to touch up my tan for like 30-40 minutes afterwards. None of the other girls were sweating, and I was like, guys, what am I doing wrong? And obviously you can't tell. I couldn't tell at the time because I was so concentrating. And the same again happened for the other shows, but I was a little bit more wary of it, so I was a bit more prepared. But yeah, it's hard, and you don't know how long. You could be really close. Like me and the girl who won, we were so close, so they just kept us going and going and going. And that's the thing, you will never know. And the classes are bigger, so sometimes even if you're at the back, you've still got to hold your presentation. Like, from the second you're on that stage, if you can catch their eye, even if you're standing in the corner, that will like it can add up, and they will remember you. And I think that's the key thing.
It's, going back to your competition, when we watched you, it was WMBF, wasn't it? Your first one. So I remember,
like a lifetime ago now.
I know, it feels like
so long ago.
So when we were watching it, well, we were waiting. Obviously, we were there for almost the entire day.
It was a very, very long day.
Especially the female classes being later. But I remember we all sat down. I was sat next to John and Justine and everyone else who came to watch. And we decided, we'll watch some of the men's classes because obviously we're into men's bodybuilding.
It's still quite interesting, even though they can be long. Like, it is still quite nice to see.
We didn't know anyone on the stage, but then when people came out, you know, it kind of comes into that, not so much judgmental, but, you know, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, like, okay, we reckon that person might.
Yeah.
And it depends on their. And then I remember one guy in particular, and I added him on Instagram after this because I was so impressed, was he came out and he put on one of the best routines I think I've ever seen at a natural bodybuilding show.
So good.
And we were all sat, and I didn't even know the guy, but I was screaming for him.
Yeah.
I was like, this guy is amazing.
It's a vibe, and you get excited by it. And it's not until you go to a bodybuilding show you start realizing, like, everyone's like, oh, like, what makes it a good, because you've probably had it very similar, and I know how I had it through prep. Everyone's like, oh my god, you look great, and I'm like, yeah, but that's in no reference to what you're going to see on stage because you have no idea. So when you sit in the audience, you understand it, and how the judges, yes, okay, you might not be a judge, but you'll be able to tell like where like the condition is. And when we speak about condition, we're talking about more lines and tightness. You can tell who's watery. Like when you say that to a normal human being, they're like, what the hell? Yeah. Like, especially closer to peak. But you can notice it in a flash. Or if someone's not come into condition at all, or, you know,
my last show, for example, I was, excuse me, I was way too flat for my last show. Sorry, I'm choking.
No, that's okay. Take your time.
So yeah, my last show, I came in way too flat, so I wasn't carved up enough.
Yeah.
And a week later, after that show, when I had carbs in, a week of carbs in,
but it was so full.
I look like a completely different person, and it's just insane how much a week's difference can make. And just food and water manipulation. It's just crazy how specific it can be into how different your physique looks.
Yeah, and I think fullness is something that people forget about. Like, so many people, it's not about to be as tiny as possible. It's really not. Like, obviously you have to, you want to come in at your absolute best in the most condition, but if you're flat and nothing's popping, like, it's not going to show off your physique in the best way, even more so when you pose, because you're not going to be able to get the most out of your poses anyway.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it is you can be lean and be small, or you can be lean and be big.
Yeah.
In the same physique, it can have two completely different looks depending on how full and how flat it is.
Yeah.
So it's a world of manipulation that I don't understand.
It's crazy. That's why that's why we have John. And it's really fascinating about how much you learn about what your body responds to as well. And then obviously bringing that back into the poses, like, you've got to be able, obviously we spoke about holding them, but you has to be a flow as well. And obviously, well, both you and I, Figure has a routine as well. And I didn't have a routine in my first show. I had one in my second, and I absolutely loved it. And I think you can bring so much and show off the best bits, and also the bits that you love. Like, obviously you always have, so typically in rounds, and you'll be similar, you have like your mandatories, and then you have sort of like a muscularity kind of round, and then obviously you have your routine, and the judges they will do all of those rounds, and then they can spring upon you any extras depending on how they're about to judge it, especially if things are close. But obviously, again, with the route, like, you have to practice each individual part of it as well. And it makes such a difference. Now, not all classes have routines, but some of them will have like I walks or T walks, I think it's called.
Specific times on stage where the competitor is out in front of the judges by themselves without being in a lineup. They'll have, so for classic and for figure, you'll have 60 seconds of music of your choice to make a routine to, so a choreographed posing routine. In terms of men's physique and bikini, they will tend to have I walks or T walks, and they'll go out on their own and they'll do their mandatory poses, won't they?
Yeah, it changes. Again, where it can be confusing with posing is it can vary depending on each federation. And obviously that's something that I would always recommend, do as much research into the federations of the competitions that you're doing, because it will make such a difference, because it can really throw you off on show day if you're expecting to do something and then you need to do something else. And you don't want it to throw you off, because stress, cortisol levels, water retention, no thank you. No one needs that.
Not at all. And it's like with a perfect example of that is when I competed at the Arnold's, because luckily I'd practiced posing so much that I knew the minute they shouted out something, I knew exactly what to do.
Yeah.
But because there were so many competitors at the Arnold's, I was on stage with like 20 guys, and we went up there and they put in, so normally you would do your quarter turns and then your mandatory poses. So what they did was they said, okay, front relaxed, front double bicep. And they combined the quarter turn, and with everybody on stage was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But because I knew what to listen out for, I was like, cool, I can do this, no problem.
And also, like, in that respect, I guess you just have to stay calm as possible, because it can really throw you off. And you see people on stage, even when, for example, like their music doesn't go off at the right time, or their music hasn't gone on, or it's not their music. Like it doesn't matter. Like, you've just got to crack on. Like you have no choice. And I guess that's where the more practice you do, the more it will show.
Yes.
And also the more practice you do, the more confident you'll be. So if something like that happens, you're not going to be thrown off. No. And I think confidence comes into it quite a bit, and something that's really important to highlight, because not everyone, some people get really nervous, they love the bodybuilding process. They know they want to be on stage, but actually the fact of getting on stage terrifies them.
It can be nerve-wracking. I remember when I, even though I've been on stage plenty of times, my last competition in June, I remember being back behind that curtain. I was like, I think I'm being a bit nervous right now. And it's like, you don't, until you're out, when you're out there, it's fine. But when you're first kind of building up to it, you don't realise the nerves kind of just hit you.
Yeah, that backstage bit's scary. Yeah. If I hadn't have had John with me in my first one, I actually don't know what I would have done. But nerves are good.
Yes.
But obviously you don't want them to take over too much.
No.
And you've just got to, whether like having that confidence for you, like you've got to show that confidence to them, because if you're like inwards or like into yourself, they will notice, and so will everyone else in the audience. Like, you don't want, there's nothing worse than when you can tell someone's like nervous. It's sort of, you, as an audience member, you're like, no, like, and it's like, do you think you can mask confidence? Like,
yeah, I guess again, posing practice, it builds confidence no matter what you do. And that even comes down to like photo shoots and stuff. Yeah. Remember I did a photo shoot and I had no idea what I was doing. But then I was like, and he was like, I'll just do some bodybuilding poses. I was like, oh, cool, I know these.
I can do that.
And it's the same on stage. You know, if you know what you're doing, if you know you're confident in the routine you've got, if you know that you're confident in where your body needs to be for the mandatories or any other poses, even for like a pose down where you can just go and freestyle it, then you'll have no problem, because you know what you're doing. And that's just when practice and discipline comes in, to just constantly rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat.
And also like that's where as well your coach comes into it, because they can give you confidence and give you tweaks. Like, they will know exactly how you need to be looking. So like if your posing's not up to scratch or something, hopefully they should, if they're a great coach, they should highlight that to you as well. Because obviously they want the best out of your physique as well. And your posing like preferences as well can change throughout your prep. Like I remember it looks entirely different. I remember never liking my side pose, just being like, oh, it's not the best one. And then by my stage shots, I loved all my side poses.
I think I changed my routine about 20 times before my show.
It's really hard. And obviously once you've got that routine, you've got your eye walk, you know what you're doing, your mandatories, your muscularity rounds, rinse and repeat always. And you highlighted just then as well, pose down. Now, to explain a pose down for anyone who's not into bodybuilding or not seen a stage show before, it's basically where the hard work is done, you have been judged, and the judges are just kind of getting everything together. They've got time to, and you basically, everyone just kind of comes into the middle of the stage and has a pose down. and what the male ones are so great. You've got like males going head to head with each other, but it's also where you're kind of like, we're all in this together. We've all suffered. Like, let's just have some fun.
That's the best part about the bodybuilding community is, though you are at competition with each other, there's no foul play.
No, not at all.
You know, let's just, we're done now, so let's just have some fun.
Yeah.
Whatever the result is. And then obviously, you know, people want to win. But by the pose down, you've done the judging part.
Yeah.
So you're just like, right, let's go nuts.
And I remember being like, oh, like, this is sick. Like, let's just go for it.
Feeling,
yeah, it is. And it is literally that, there's that, I can chill. I can relax now. Or the most I possibly can anyway. And I guess as well, like, it's important, we've spoken a lot about the stage, but I think posing, and I spoke about this just to introduce the pod, but people who want to get into posing but aren't competitive. Now, not everyone has to be competitive. It's not always about that. You don't have to be a bodybuilder on stage to be you don't have to be competitive. And I think so many people, I don't know what it is from a male perspective, but I know from a female perspective, like, so many friends are like, oh, I wish like I could know how to show off my back, or, you know, show off my shoulders and look a bit fuller. Like, we all love like posing into a mirror, like with a pump, like, oh, I do. And I think as well, like, anyone can do it.
Anybody can do it, and it can be beneficial in a number of ways, and not just for presentation purposes. So, you know, probably the biggest thing in the world right now, social media, as you said, you know, posing with a pump on. There are certain ways that you can, again, going back to the whole illusion, you can make your body look certain ways that it's not. But in a photo, it looks like, wow, that looks amazing. Yeah,
and I think it can bring confidence to our own physique as well. Even when you're out with friends or you're at a social event, like it.
Photos and like, oh, if I just move my hips this way, my ass looks bigger.
Or if I just like pump up this shoulder. But now the problem is I can't get out of it. So anytime I do pose for a photo, that's all I do. Someone said to me, oh, do you always do that? Yeah, it's kind of stuck now.
I mean, it stays with you, but it's not necessarily a bad thing either. When it comes to, it's what I tell my clients about, to pose when they're training as well. And there's some mad benefits that come with this. And this can be for anybody. So you'll see in a lot of maybe bodybuilding gyms predominantly, but you will see in other gyms, people will, you know, they'll flex in the mirror after they've just done a few rounds of dumbbell curls. But there is actually a huge amount of benefit to that. So it doesn't so much matter if you're posing properly at that moment, but you're then doing isometric holds. So in between your sets, you're driving more blood into your muscles. Essentially,
that you've just worked.
So they're already fatigued. They've already got blood in them. So you're forcing more blood. So effectively, you're progressively overloading the muscle for endurance and for potential size that could be added through just flexing, which is a crazy
I remember John always, well, more towards the back end, but the back half end of prep. He was like, we do a pump. Okay, 2 rounds of posing. Go again. 2 rounds of posing. Go again. 2 rounds of posing. It would kill me. But it makes such a difference because all posing is understanding the contraction of the muscle. Now, when you're training, think about that, because not enough people do. And I think, like, it's all well and good moving like a machine or something, but you've still got to know how to contract that muscle. And that is exactly the same in posing as well. You're just holding it.
Mind to muscle connection.
So I think as well, and that's why we take time to actually understand what we're doing when we're training, or you should do. Because then, you know, equally, then when we go into a pose, you're going to be able to know what you're feeling for. Takes time sometimes. You can't always notice it straight away. But that ultimately is only going to benefit everything. And it's cool to flex too.
It is, And it's like understanding certain, because you see a lot of people when they kind of start going to the gym and stuff, they'll post pictures of them like flexing the biceps or whatever. And it's like, okay, so, you know, you're new to the gym, you've made a bit of progress, you're quite proud of it. You've just posted a picture on Instagram of you going like this. Okay, what happens if you tilt the elbows forward? Now your lats have come out, now your chest is going higher, now your arm looks bigger. So it's like you can just to be a lot more proud of your physique and to show off
and own it as well.
Yeah, so you don't need to. You'd be ashamed to have the progress without showing off everything you've made. Rather than, just kind of like, oh yeah, I've made a bit of progress.
Yeah.
Like, no, show it off.
Yeah. I remember last year when I was working towards my first client photo shoot, my girls' team shoot, and I was teaching the girls how to blow out their abs.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone, you gotta, like, even when you're shredded, your abs don't look how they look if you were to do like an absolute, like, abs and thigh position. Yeah. Like, they don't look so condensed and super, super shredded because you're moving and you're breathing. And it's quite a skill. And I remember one of my girls, Lizzie, she won't mind me mentioning her name, being like just continually blown out. Like, it takes time and it takes practice, but it's pretty cool when you can do that, and especially, like you say, when you're lean enough to be able to show that off. Like, the abs are currently in hiding for me, but we might get there by the end of the mini cut. But obviously, so I guess that mainly sums up everything we could possibly talk about on posing and presentation. I mean, we could go down so many avenues and go into specifics. So if you ever have any more questions on posing or presentation for me or Morgan, being a posing coach, do be sure to let us know. But yeah, I don't know whether there's anything else really to add, or is there anything you want to highlight to finish off?
Mainly to summarize, in terms of presentation and posing, as a bodybuilder, it matters just as much as your prep does, as much as your training does, because your training and your development is what your prep is about. The competition is about posing. I don't care what anybody says, but to be proud of that, to take, to when you do your routine, to have the right music to really emphasize the emotion of what you've gone through in the prep. Because at the end of the day, when you get on stage, the judges do not care. No matter what you've gone through to get to that point, they do not care, because they don't know you. They don't want to know you. All they want to know is what they see in front of them.
Yeah.
Is that good enough for us to place? If it is, and that comes off first impressions, then you're in the money. But if you can't show it off, then you've just gone through all of that for nothing.
Yeah. So, and it's always something you can bring. Yeah. Like, if you don't place and your posing could be better, like, it's all
well higher than somebody who's got a better physique than you.
Yeah, hugely. 100%. And the judges don't care. Work harder. Start posing now. And it's just vital, because I remember, especially in all of my comps and stuff, that you can, if your posing's not up to scratch, you can practice your posing. If your condition's not up to scratch, like, you can bring more condition. But you wanna know that you've done everything possible, that's the reason you've not got those top spots or top spot, whatever it may be. So something to remember and leave you with for sure for that one.
Be proud of what you worked for.
Yeah, own it. And I promise you that the confidence will come with it as well. It takes time, but start now.
Exactly, yeah. Start as early as possible. No matter if you're in condition or you haven't even started yet, just start now, because by the time it gets to it, believe me, you're going to wish you started earlier. Yeah,
hugely. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. It was so much fun. I feel like the time flies every time I do one of these. And yeah, obviously, if you have any other questions, do let us know. And I look forward to seeing you on the next pod.
Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, Supergirl here, and I am a super fan of SMJ Media Group. They provide support for local businesses, charities and events, and of course create fun content for all of you. If you enjoy our content and would like to help support us, please go to buymeacoffee.com/SMJ Media Group and buy us a coffee.